Sarcoma.org.
Okay, your sound should be up.
3 minutes.
In Vietnam,
Okay, thank you. And
the 82nd
please
Airborne
mute me
Division.
when he is.
They never talked about it.
Giving
And my mom knew not to ask.
Sounds good.
Dad buried himself in work and self-medicated and would lose his temper sometimes. Loud noises would put him on edge. It got rough. So I finally said to him, Dad, you gotta get help.
As a family member or friend, you may be the first to notice when a veteran you love has been going through changes. Things like withdrawing, drinking more, or increased anger could be a sign of a larger health concern, but help is available.
Dad finally went to VA for one-on-one and group therapy and got some really great tools to help him manage things. And I got my dad back.
Listen to hundreds of inspiring stories at maketheconnection.net and learn how you can
2 minutes.
in your life.
Great. Thank you
Treatment
so much.
works. Recovery is possible.
Dell's Black Friday event is their biggest sale of the year. Shop limited time deals on laptops like the stylish, innovative XPS 13, engineered to do it all on the Intel Evo platform. Plus, save big on ultra-sharp monitors and top brand accessories. It's the perfect time to upgrade any home, business, or gaming setup powered by Intel Core processors. Shop now at Dell.com/deals to take advantage of huge savings and free shipping. Again, that's Dell.com/deals.
What's for dinner? Burgers?
After last week, no thanks.
Avoiding foods due to fear of diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose, oily stools? It may not be just stomach issues. It could be EPI, or exocrine pancreatic insufficiency.
How you doing?
EPI can cause uncomfortable symptoms because
to
it's a
see you this
condition where the
morning.
pancreas doesn't release enough digestive enzymes to break down food. But EPI can be managed. Use the symptom checker
Gonna
on
look at that debate last
identifyepi.com
night.
and talk to your doctor about your
Gonna look
symptoms.
at the
That's
fight that's broken out
identifyepi.com.
in
Sponsored by
Congress
AbbVie.
about
Transitioning
Israel.
from being a Marine to a civilian was very hard.
It is
I
getting
lost my
more and
purpose.
more
I
interesting
lost
every day.
the drive that I had.
It used to be such
That
unanimity,
is a
but
very
you know,
dark and
1 minute.
lonely place to be. It took me
Fact is,
surrendering to myself
everybody
to get
has
the help that I
differences.
needed.
everybody.
At my
You
very
never,
first Wounded Warrior Project
ever
event,
have
I met Ray Pizarro. He told me you
only
need to
two
have the
coats of wet
courage
paint
to forgive yourself
are
for
as
the
close
things you've
as
done in the
close as
past.
everybody has
I
said
got
that
it
we are.
tattooed on my
You know?
hand. My depression kept telling
Keep
me,
that in
thinking in
mind,
this.
y'all.
And just before I was about to pull the trigger, I looked down at my hand, and that's what saved my life that night. That was the beginning of my incredible journey with the Wounded Warrior Project.
See how we help warriors combat
Hey,
stigma
Robert. Hey,
at
Kenneth.
woundedwarriorproject.org/combat
Everybody,
stigma.
please like and share the show.
WC. Stand by.
Okay.
WCPT from TuneIn.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you today. Right here, as you hear my little chug-a-lug in the background, you know, the stories continue to evolve overnight. So, you know, I have to, right up till we get on the air, pull things down. Hey, let's talk about the debate last night. Let's talk about this fight that's broken out, or, well, just a conflict amongst the Democrats over how to handle this conflict in the Middle East. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, one of the leaders of the Democratic Party in the U.S. House of Representatives, said that, you know, if these congresspersons did not vote for particular legislation condemning Hamas, without mentioning Palestinian lives, that you must have no soul, which angered a lot of people, including Andre Carson, who is Muslim. He said, well, wait a minute, have no soul? What are you talking about? So let's talk about it, because there are a lot of moving parts here. And then people talking about Tucker Carlson. Maybe he should run for vice president with Donald Trump. I don't know. And, you know, 2/3 of Americans want a ceasefire. Why is it that so few congresspersons will vote for it? Why is it that we won't? It's even been hard pushing Bernie Sanders to say, get on board with this ceasefire. And so now you have 100 Staffers from the U.S. House of Representatives. This is huge, everybody. I worked up there when I was in college. They staged a walkout yesterday, demanding that their bosses support the ceasefire. That is huge. Well, let me give you a little bit of context. At least when I got to Congress, oh my goodness, more than 30 years ago when I was in college, you have different groups that would come and find the interns. And that's how I got there. I was an intern for Congressman Gus Savage and worked under a woman who later became the deputy governor, Luann Peters. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant strategist she is. And but the first among equals was APAC. They had a whole program for interns where they would just really bring you into the congressional process. You understood how they lobbied, the issues that they stood for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was kind of understood that you kind of went along with them, because they were very, very powerful lobby. They were and still are. Well, things are shifting. And so for these staffers to walk out and say, hey, wait a minute, ceasefire, that's a whole lot. So we got to talk about that today. What does that mean? What's happening politically? And of course, we've got Dr. Max Wolf. He wants to talk to you about credit card debt and this economic slowdown. How can you make it through? How can you make it through? How can you make it through? So let's get right to some of the headlines so we can get to the good news and get to the rest of the day, everybody. 5 candidates clashed in the third Republican primary debate last night. The presidential hopefuls addressed the Israel-Gaza war, abortion, and the opioid crisis. They also attacked frontrunner Donald Trump, who skipped the debate and had an event not too far away. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, many people say, won the debate. What do you think? Did you see it? Oh, well, many people saying that this is her moment after she called Vivek Ramaswamy scum after he brought up her 25-year-old daughter's use of TikTok. Ouch. A court ruled that former President Trump can appear on Minnesota's 2024 primary ballot. It's one of several legal attempts to use the 14th Amendment to block him from running again because of the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. The Minnesota Supreme Court said the former president can be on the primary ballot in March, but did not rule out striking him from the general election ballot. Democrats pointed to this week's election results as a roadmap to success in 2024. What do you think, everybody? Tens of thousands of Palestinians are fleeing fighting in northern Gaza. Disease is spreading. They're being denied water. The water that they are forced to drink is undrinkable. 96+% of the water in Gaza is basically poison. So what do you think about that, everybody? What do you think about that? As humanitarian assistance is not able to get through. More than 500 trucks a day before October 7th were coming through. That's how bad things in Gaza were then. Now you can barely get, 12, 20 trucks. Wow. The Hollywood actors, thank heavens, reached a deal with studios to end their strike. This means that the work stoppage that disrupted Hollywood for months is over as of this morning. SAG-AFTRA members still have to vote on the new contracts, but many people believe that they will affirm it. Actors won the largest minimum wage increases in 40 years, new residuals for streaming shows, and protections against the use of AI, according to the studios. And the Earth had just had its hottest months on record. Wow. Here's a town in the United States that's going to hit 90 degrees today. In the mainland. Yeah, unbelievable. It's crazy. The Panthers will be playing the Bears tonight. Oh my goodness, are you going to be watching at 7:15 p.m. Central Standard Time in the NBA? The Suns won 16, the Bulls won 15. Oh, that's a heartbreaker. The Timberwolves won 22. The Pelicans 101. In Chicago, we'll have a high of 55 degrees. It will be sunny. And in Minneapolis, St. Paul, 46 degrees, partly sunny. And those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Everybody like and share, like and share. Hey, Robert. Hey, Kenneth. Hey, Miss Velma, sending all of you so much love today. Everybody, please like and share right now. Like and share, like and share, like and share, like and share. Takesha, how you doing? Vieta, how are you? Sending you all so much love today. Call me at 773-763-9278 on the Santita Jackson Show lines. Hey, Pastor Darius Brooks, you are giving away this food every week. so much of it, and so many people need so much. Americans are functionally poor, everybody. There's 7 million more poor people in America in 2023 than there were in 2022. And the ranks continue to grow. And so we thank God for your ministry and what you are doing to help feed people. Pastor Brooks, how can they get to your church, Grace Central in Westchester, Illinois, to get this food? And how can we worship with you?
Santita, thank you so much. Grace at your church, 10316 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. We're feeding from Tuesdays from 5 till 7 every Tuesday, and on Wednesdays from noon till 2 for the seniors. We were jam-packed on yesterday. We had an overwhelming response. If you look at my Facebook page, you'll see it, where people are being fed. And Santita, I'm excited about the word of God, because sometimes you have people who just don't see godly meaning of things like why they pulling in the line with a Mercedes, why they got in the line with a work truck, and why they in the line looking like that. People. I share with Grace Central staff and members, and even in life, you have to interpret your season. You have to know God's word for you to have the correct answers. Just because they're in line with a Mercedes does not mean that they're not needing food. Just because you see somebody driving a truck, it could have been somebody else's truck. You just have to have in your heart to serve. And I'm listening to your program and how amazing you are really articulating foundational the rules that we can understand about the compassion and how we're supposed to be towards people. That's God all day long. And all of the naysayers and people who are anything against godly principles, Santita, I listen to not at all. So we're doing it. We're excited. Every time I see somebody in that line, my heart goes out to know we're doing the right things. On every Tuesday, Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchen Street, Westchester, Illinois, on Tuesdays from 5 till 2, and on Wednesdays for seniors, so you won't be out in the evening from noon till 2. GraceCentral.net, GraceCentral.net, GraceCentral.net. Santita, I love the word of God. I share with people. It's a lamp unto our feet, and it's a light into our pathway. Those that are believers, we just choose to use a different kind of life based on what we see, based on yesteryears, today, and tomorrow. If there's a promise that God say we can have, you better find yourself believing in something or someone. If you don't, you're going to find yourself believing and listening to you, and that's not a good place. 1 Corinthians 9:24. Do you not know that in a race, all the runners that run, but only one received the prize? So run that you may obtain it. You see, he goes from exclusive to inclusive to exclusive. If I use for a topic today, and I won't be long because I'm excited, don't wait till it gets better. Fight in the fire. Don't wait till it gets better. Fight in the fire. Santita, there's a personal struggle and a private struggle. Doing you and what you do is two separate things. We're living by the grace of God. Every morning we should pinch ourselves and say, we are saved by grace. With the word of God, we are looking for a meaningful and a purpose for reason for living. And God gives us the meaning for and purposes for. And Santita, I don't want to feel good about what I'm doing. I want to feel good doing what I'm doing. And if you're going to win a fight, you can't feel good about the fight. You got to feel good about what you're doing to stay focused on winning the fight. It's good to have fantasies, and sometimes they even come true. But this is not how this thing works at all anymore. No one waves a wand and things go away. Santita, everyone have differences. Everyone have differences. We are not as close as we appear to be. But the only limit we have is the ones that we put on ourselves. And as I close, when we are there are a lot of moving parts, but don't let what appears to affect you take away what's on the inside of you. Santita and those under the sound of my voice, don't wait till it gets better. Fight in the fire.
Amen to that. I love it because, it is hot. And look, that's just the way it works. How can we worship with you?
Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, every Sunday morning from 10:30 to noon. If you don't want information on your situation that brings revelation for your elevation, so you can reach your destination with a confirmation while never losing inspiration, this ain't the place for you. But there's answers for everything we know and do if we trust in God in everything we do. Grace Central Church, every Sunday, 10:30 till noon. We're out at noon to make sure everybody spend time with their families. Everybody, happy Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, and make sure whatever you do, what's on the inside of you, if there's a fight in you, don't wait till it gets better. Fight in the fire.
Amen, amen, amen. Sending you so much love, Pastor Darius Brooks. Pastor, let me go to Andre. Andre, did you see the debates last night? The debate?
Yes, ma'am, I did. Good morning to you, Miss
Now let me
Santita.
ask
Yes, I
you,
did see the
what did you think?
This is the second one of those debates I watched, and I did not particularly care for it because the question is never asked to them, and this is the question they should ask. Why are there none of, if you elected president, would you commit to having a more diverse staff or multicultural staff and more African Americans in your cabinet? That question never comes up, and I don't see how things get better if they put topics like that on the back burner during these debates. So why the issue of race and ethnicity never comes up, and so we'll be where we at. I want to comment on these polls. I heard you yesterday, but I wasn't able to get in. Mm-hmm. But this is how I feel about these polls, Santita. These polls reek of subliminal seduction and should be outlawed. Why should they be outlawed during the political season? Because they incite violence. They incite insurrection. Those polls is what made Donald Trump and those people go and storm that Capitol, because the polls were telling Donald Trump that he was winning, and when he lost, he couldn't accept it because the polls had subliminally seduced him, brainwashed him, and his supporters didn't think he'd win it. So what these polls have done, they've caused division amongst family and friends and fighting. They've incited violence. So, yeah, if you want to do a poll on food and all that stuff, that's fine. But during the political season, the polls should be outlawed because they've proved to be detrimental, and they only serve the purpose to set the narrative of what the poll taker wants to take. Like I said, they didn't ask the polls, or where's the poll that just say, should a man who said that he would grab a woman by the genitals be president? Where's the poll that asking people, should a man that incite an erection be president? Where are the polls that says that if a man is stealing and falsifying documents should be president? See, these polls are never asked because they don't want to spread that narrative. The pollsters only want the narrative out there that they want to manipulate people. And that's why I say it reeks of the subliminal seduction. And we have to be aware of that and not take these polls so easily, because they are really not serving the purpose of the people. They're serving their narrative. If they were really concerned about the people, they would ask the questions that people are concerned about. But they definitely are not doing that.
But I don't think polls are the problem, Andre. I really don't. I think that you've got. Let me finish, because all I'm saying is that you have a whole corporate media organ. That to me is the issue, because they have pundits. They have news readers who now opine. They give you their opinions. They're the ones who shape opinion. Polls are part of that, but polls don't bother me. The real poll that matters is when you go to the poll and vote. And so, just know that a narrative is constantly being shaped. And I'm no Trump defender, but this is what he did say. He didn't say that women should be grabbed by the genitals. He didn't say that. You listen to the whole statement. He said, when you are famous, when you have a little money, when you have a little power, women will let you do anything, including that. People get upset when they want to point it out. I'm like, listen to the transcript. That's what he said. He didn't say that that's what should happen to women. He said, women will let you do anything if they could be proximate to fame, proximate to money. And so, there's that.
You're absolutely right. I stand corrected that. But what he did say, tell the police is that when you put these African Americans in a police car, it's okay to bump their head. Yeah, but he did say that.
I was just correcting that point. I mean, the thing is, look, Biden was against busing. So, you can you can go through all these records, right? And see a lot of things that are just way off the reservation for all of us. I'm hearing you and I'm feeling you. That having been said, when you can, call out corporate media, call out ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, all of them. When they say and do things that make you go, huh? What's this? You're not being unbiased. I mean, for heaven's sake, since October 7th, we barely heard about what's happening in Gaza. More than 13,000 people have been killed there. Wow. More than 2,800 people are buried beneath the rubble. We're not talking about that. That's real too, Andre. Talk to me during the break for a hot second. Let's talk about this debate. Let's talk about Tucker Carlson for vice president. Let's talk about these 100 staffers who walked out of Congress yesterday. That is huge. Heating up on Capitol Hill. Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Andre?
This is Chicago's Progressive
Yes,
Talk.
ma'am.
Thank you so much for calling in.
WCPT Willow Springs and online at
you call well,
WCPT820.com, where
hold on
facts
one second,
matter.
because I can barely.
This is Ron Whittingham.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
so much, Henry. No. He's got
Yes, ma'am.
to be fair to him, he's got a lot of stuff going on. So he's in charge of the whole station, and there are like several stations there. So he is like running between my show and other shows, trying to make sure that they're all up on the air. We had an issue yesterday, so he's trying to stay on top of that as well. But thank you so much for calling in.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you for understanding the point. The point was that those polls are detrimental, and you know better, and I know better, because just like you said, we know not to listen to these polls, but there are people out here that don't know, that are mentally ill, that hear these polls, and it plays into their mental disability. They see these polls, and they get angry and excited, and they want to take up weapons and take to the streets because they believe these polls. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that these polls, they are doing some damage. They may serve a good purpose, but they're also doing some damage for themselves.
Well, that's why we have to become more discerning, but also look at the fact that it's a whole system. It's not just the polls. Polls are part of it, Andre. That's the only appeal I'm making to you.
Right.
It is every time
right.
you turn on that TV, you're getting a message.
Absolutely. So it's all subliminal seduction.
All of it. So looking at the polls, that's part of it. But if you notice, they stopped showing you the polls when the people's votes were counted to what the polls told you. Remember the polls that you would take just as you were going out of the polling place, which almost had 100% accuracy, Andre. But the moment the votes, which are on a machine, on a computer, which I don't really trust, to be frank with you, the moment that there was a contradiction between the polls, what people said, how people said they voted, and what the machine said, they said, okay, we're not going to talk about that anymore. I'm like, really?
Hi, Ms. Jackson.
Yes.
We have Attorney Patillo, Dwight McKee, and Reverend Dr. Yuri ready to go.
Yeah.
Also,
Okay,
good to hear that you can talk to people in the commercial break. Good to know that that's fixed.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're working on it.
We
Absolutely. We have a minute and a half.
struggle together. There's no big me's and little u's. We all got to fight this battle together.
And we're all in it together.
Yes,
Thank you, sweetie.
Yes, ma'am.
Sending you
Thank
so
you,
much
ma'am.
love. Oh, no, thank you, sir. Sending you much love,
Oh,
Andre.
okay,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
listening.
Have a good day.
You too, sweetie. Hey, you guys, how you doing today? Dwight? Good.
Good morning.
Attorney Patillo, how are you? Reverend Dr. Yuri, how are you?
Well, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing
Good
well.
morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. I want to see some more pictures of this food that you make. Would you ever do a cooking show?
Back in a minute.
Robert, you're the only one who would do. I mean, come on. Would you ever do a cooking show?
Oh, my wife has been asking me about that for years, so I'll work on it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, it's just a friend of mine really got into. I mean, he is now a chef because he was really, really into it, and he was going to go to become a doctor, and we were all like, wait, those of us who were close to him, we were like, why are you going to do that? You love to do this. And he was just, he's become like this tremendous chef. So, not trying to talk you out of what you're doing because you're brilliant at what you do, but I'm just saying.
There's nothing wrong for career change.
Oh my gosh. Or just adding to, right? Adding to.
Stand by.
Okay, stand by, everybody.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
And hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Santita Jackson Show. We got a lot to talk about. Of course, we're going to be talking about the economy in the next hour. The bottom of the next hour with Dr. Wolf. It's slowing down. People are dealing with a lot of credit card debt. We're going to be talking about that. But right now, let's talk about, you just heard Andre talking about the debate. Did you see it last night? What did you think about it? What about this idea that maybe Tucker Carlson could become Trump's running mate? And Dwight McKee made the point earlier this week. Look, this is a run for the number 2 spot. Not someone who can take out Trump, because it doesn't look like he's going to be taken out anytime soon. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. And what about this fight that has broken out within the Democratic caucus in Congress? Oh, yeah. I was sharing with you that when you got to Congress, at least I did more than 30 years ago when I was in college, as an intern, even as an intern, you would be visited by lobbies. But first among equals was AIPAC. They were so organized. It was incredible. And they would tell you about Congress, what they stood for, why they wanted you to advocate for them, all of that. And it was understood that they were the most powerful lobbying group, aside from oil and, big industry on all of the Hill. And so now for 100 staffers, it's, mind you, it's a complete hierarchy up there. For staffers to walk out and demand that their bosses support a ceasefire is huge. Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire National Leadership Team of Rainbow Push, senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore. Of course, Dwight McKee, the dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project and the National Action Network founding member of the board of Operation Push. And let me start with you. From the National Leadership Team of Rainbow Push, of course, he hosts his own dynamic show. It's great. Every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time on the iconic WAOK radio station. Robert Patillo, when you see 100 staffers walk out, you're seeing John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania. He's being confronted by his constituents. Hey, what about a ceasefire? Now, this man never said he was a progressive, but people got fooled by the hoodie and the shorts, I think, and the flip-flops. He said, I'm not a progressive, in fact. But you're seeing no ceasefire, no votes. These are the headlines. Battleground voters trust Trump over Biden on the Israeli-Palestinian question. And Biden is getting squeezed. This is from the USA Today over Israel-Hamas war. Will it cost him the White House? What about these staffers? Could you kind of describe for people just how massive a move that is? 100 staffers staged a walkout yesterday on Capitol Hill.
Well, for people who have never been on the Hill and never worked around elected officials do very little. The staffers do everything. The staffers are the people who are in charge of handling constituents.
My brother's working hard. What you talking about?
Other than him, everyone else does very little. He's the lone soul there. But the rest of them, they don't read the legislation for the most part. They don't write the legislation. They don't interact with the constituents directly normally. They spend the majority of their time actually fundraising because they're always planning for the next election cycle or attending meetings and briefings. So you have a general idea of what's going on. But the day-to-day operations of the office is being run by the staff. So for staffers to put their careers at risk, because these are career people who are chiefs of staff or communications director, etc. Regardless of who the congressperson is, they will still be there. They move from from congressperson to congressperson. Much of it is based on recommendations and being in the right circles. So to kind of buck the system and stand up against your own member in order to kind of demand a ceasefire, that is a momentous event. And I think that it really shows the base of the Democratic Party trying to flex their muscle because, as you said, the Israeli lobby is the most powerful lobby. They are able to control speech. They're able to control votes. They're able to control military spending in the United States of America. There are secret weapons that only the U.S. and Israel have. We won't export them to Great Britain, France, or anyone else because they're the only ones we trust. And that being the case, it makes it very difficult for President Biden to be squeezed into a position of, well, if you support a ceasefire, America's strategic interest in the Middle East may be at risk, not to mention the political hit you'll take if the Israeli lobby starts pushing against you in the midterms versus what you're seeing from the base where it's undeniable the images we see coming out of Palestine. It's undeniable the statements that Netanyahu keeps making where he says, well, after this war, Israel will be in charge of the security of the Gaza Strip, that Israel will basically be the governing authority in that area. He's admitting he is annexing this territory. He's doing nothing different than what Vladimir Putin is doing in Ukraine. It's difficult to make the argument that on the one hand, Putin's invasion and subjugation of this area is morally wrong, but Netanyahu doing the exact same thing, along with a genocide, is right. So it's going to be a very difficult kind of middle ground to try to find. But I think President Biden is being forced into supporting the ceasefire because there's no way to defend nearly 5,000 children and over 10,000 people being murdered by the Israeli government ostensibly for their own security.
And 2,800 people in the rubble, at least, according to Al Jazeera. I mean, it's absolutely horrific. But you see Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's a leader, of course, in a Democratic leader. She's one of the biggest, most influential people in the Democratic caucus. She set off an uproar because she has a resolution affirming support for Israel in the war against Hamas. I mean, again, Robert, we've never seen anything like this, really, not in the history of modern, I'd say post-World War II politics. She said someone who votes against this, I would think, doesn't have a soul. Boy, people are mad. First among them, Andre Carson, who is a Muslim. He's like, don't have a soul. He said, you are a coward and a punk for saying this. I said, oh, gosh, because congresspersons don't speak to each other publicly that way. Privately, they have their words. But publicly, no. Well,
even the resolution to censure Rashida Tlaib was passed. She's the only Palestinian member of Congress, but not just passed. It passed with bipartisan support. You had something like 22 Democrats line to vote in favor of the censure resolution. This shows the power of that Israeli lobby, but also it shows that finally we're seeing people stand up on the other side of the aisle and be able to have a voice, because I dare say 20 years ago we wouldn't have seen the Palestinian people, Muslims, staffers standing up because the talking points, the American policy was so strong in favor of Israel. This is the first time we're seeing cracks in that alliance. And I think it's because of Netanyahu's overreach and Netanyahu's efforts that he's had over the last 30 years. His goal has always been the destruction of Gaza, the destruction of the West Bank, the restoration of the, not 1947 lines, but the 2000 BC lines for the kingdom of Israel and Judah. And that's been his goal from the beginning.
Call us at 773-763-9278. What do you think about all of this, everybody? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. This is, I mean, we thought, Dr. Yeri, that Ukraine was going to be at the center of the discussion in election 2024. Maybe inflation. I mean, because all of these things are real active and they're live. But this is, it's just come out the ground. Reverend Dr. Yeri, what do you make of these 100 staffers? You're very familiar with the politics of the Hill and how that works. And they staged a walkout. Now, they didn't stay out for the rest of the day, but they did make their point.
Well, good morning, Santita, to my colleagues. Look, it's clear that the staffers get it, and here's what they get.
Aside from the internal dynamics of the politics of the Hill, they are civil servants. They're not elected officials. And there's been a lot of this ignoring what the people have been demanding, which is that the elected officials stand on the side of calling for a ceasefire so that you can begin the process of working through whatever the issues are that have contributed to this dispute. Instead, we've been dealing with sound bites, cliches, talking points as the base to say, on one hand, you can and cannot say this on the Hill, hence the censure of Congresswoman Tlaib. You have the issue of what we had already seen about anti-Muslim tendencies within the caucuses on the Hill. This is just, I think, more playing out. And so the staffers have said, look, to Robert's point, the notion of understanding how the Hill works and the role of staffers, I think this was a way to kind of get the attention of the folks, all except Congressman Jackson, who we know don't get paid. It's kind of the same joke that they say about folks who go into law. If you really don't like the law and you're really not good at the law, what do? You become a judge, right? That's kind of the internal joke. And so now you have this issue where the folks who make the machine of Capitol Hill work saying, look, when it comes to making sure that we move beyond the political and set a true moral compass to resolving the carnage on both sides, right? That's the thing. There's a clear imbalance. There's imbalance in power, militarism, support, all of that. But we've got to have this particular conversation about how you're going to address what's going on in Gaza. And so I think this is a temperature check, right? I think the congressional staffers may be the thermometer. It's like going to the doctor when they're doing triage. The first thing they want to know is what's your blood pressure, what's your height, what's your weight, what's your temperature. They're a temperature gauge. And I think that temperature gauge is rising, particularly in light of what we heard from the other day that basically said, without calling it that there's going to be an occupation for the foreseeable future to make sure that you don't have a resurgence of this kind of governance with Hamas coming back. And we've talked about this many times on the show, that this has always felt like a pretextual justification for what's a land grab.
To get that oil and that gas, Todd.
Well, we got that.
No, we don't, because that's not even part of the discussion, and it really ought to be.
No. I'm saying we've had that conversation here. What I'm saying is the land grab, both the land and what's under the ground, above and air rights, ground rights, sea rights. All of those things have been part of this land grab. And that's a conversation we had very early on. And I think Big Brother Dwight raised it first, that the link between the two conflicts, between Ukraine, what happens if Russia continues to advance in its fight, and now you have mass displacement of Ukrainian Jews that are going to need to be repatriated somewhere. Where do you put them? And so there's always been a link that in the broader context, there hasn't been a conversation. On this show, there's clearly been a conversation about it. That's the context I'm saying. The we, not the capital W-E, but the us here, and so these are the things that have to be discussed. And I think these congressional staffers are going to continue to push. And here's what they have: they have the protection of the civil service employment statutes, right? What they don't have to worry about is going to the ballot and facing constituents. And I think if the members of Congress pay attention to the folks that are actually running their offices, it's going to be a pretty good temperature check of what's going on in the general population.
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, and the thing is, I had to push back just lovingly, because these congresspersons do work very hard, but so do their staffs. People think that you just get up on the Hill and you're just sitting there. No, you're doing a lot of research all the time. And the thing is, there's no way that the congresspersons in either the upper or the lower house will be able to write all this legislation. That's why a president has a cabinet. That's why anyone who's building anything has a great team who can help them get the research collated, and you come up with something good. That having been said, something is going on. Something has shifted. And I would venture to say, beyond the protection of their union, you've got the polls that have shifted. 2/3 of Americans 80% of Democrats want a ceasefire. 2/3 of voters, and 80% of Democrats want a ceasefire, And Biden is bumping into a lot of trouble with young voters. I mean, and you need the Arab vote in Michigan, for example. They swing the state, and they have said he has gone from 59% of from the Arab community down to 17% white. I mean, this is massive. So, what do you make of these folks walking out? What does it say?
Me?
Well, you're the only one who hasn't spoken. Yeah.
Oh, okay. First, I think that Yuri and Robert are right on top of this. But what people don't understand is that the staffers have access to real information. They have access to the CIA information. They write the legislation. They have access at some levels that even the congressmen don't have because they first get it and give it to the congressman. And so they're able to see behind the veil and what's really, really, really going on. So they are not swept up in the propaganda and they're not swept up in the polls. They're seeing real information in real time. And better than anybody now, I think that they understand that this is about soil and oil. And it is really a land grab at the expense of the people who live there, which is what it is mostly has been about since 1917. It's been a land grab. And for you to take somebody's land, throw them off of their land, starve them to death, and then say you have to bomb them to maintain your own security is such a contradiction. It's hard to justify oppose Putin and support Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, in many ways, is worse than Putin. Because Putin is trying to restore the prestige of Russia and trying to take back territory that history say has been part of the Soviet Union. The Israelis are taking territory that they have said that God gave them 2,000 years ago, and many of them have not lived there in 2,000 years at the expense of 3 or 4 million people who are already there and children who are starving to death. And how do you explain that, and how do you justify that? I think that the other part of this that's going to get worse is that part of this is about soil, part of this is about oil, but there is a whole stream of Zionism that is committed to the earth institution of the temple and temple worship. And they want to turn this into a Jewish state. And that they, in some levels, he sees himself as David, as a contemporary David. And that they are on this quest to take the Palestinians or the Philistines out of Israel and restore the kingdom of David for the sake of bringing back the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah. And when the Christian community really understands that a formidable part of Zionism is to create Armageddon, because Armageddon is the precursor to the Messiah coming back, it's going to create real problems, because many of the Christians who are pro-Zionist really don't understand that part of this equation, that this is a move to create that level of violence, because they feel like that once Israel is being attacked by all of the countries around it, then the Messiah is going to show up and restore Israel to its historic position as the center of the kingdom of God. And I don't think that's the part that's not really been discussed yet. That once people understand that, it's going to take this thing up to another level.
Well, that's a
and if they're going
scary
to
discussion.
rebuild the temple.
That's a
Mhm.
discussion most folks do not want to touch at all. I mean, because it's religious, it's your eternal soul. There's just a whole lot in that, but that is part of this discussion too. I mean, and it's interesting. Um, Robert, Americans trust Trump to resolve this conflict more than they trust Biden. Why do you think that is? I mean, that's according to the polls.
I think that's just a bit of backup quarterback syndrome. Everybody always loves the backup quarterback because they're not playing. Down here in Atlanta, we had Desmond Ritter starting. Everybody said put Taylor Heineke in there. They put Taylor Heineke in there, like, oh, he sucks too. There's a reason he was a backup. And so if you look at President Trump's policy towards the Middle East, it's far more aggressive than the Biden policy towards the Middle East. You had Nikki Haley come out and say that anybody who's anti-Zionist is also anti-Semitic. So let's not act as if I think that people don't quite understand that President Trump has endorsed Israel using a nuclear weapon against the Gaza Strip. There was an Israeli cabinet official who also said the same thing last week, and Netanyahu dismissed that individual. President Biden has been calling for a strategic pause. He has been pushing for humanitarian aid for Gaza. So does he have a good position on this? No. But is it as bad as the Republican position would be? Absolutely not. I do believe that if we had a Republican in office right now, particularly a neocon, someone like a Wolfowitz or a Rumsfeld or a Cheney, you would have direct U.S. boots on the ground assisting in the operation in Gaza. They would have spread this to both Syria and to Lebanon in order to try to take out the quote-unquote Iranian-backed cells there. They've been attacking our troops. You had a MQ-9 Reaper drone that was shot down off the coast of Yemen yesterday. Yemen has declared war on Israel and in support of Hamas. Also, the Iranians have indicated that they would attack. So I think this would have been a far wider and far more expansive war if you had someone like Donald Trump in office or any of the Republicans in place. But as I said, people like to imagine what the alternative would do because it's always easy to think that a backup quarterback or a new coach or a new offensive coordinator is going to change things. Sometimes the team that you have is the team that you have, and the people who are in charge are doing the best they can. The Bears got rid of Lovie Smith 10 years ago. Ain't been good since.
Do Americans? I've got about a couple of minutes here, Robert. Do you have the sense that we have an appetite for a wider war? I'm asking that question because, military recruitment has been kicked up. I was reading military.com, and they are hurriedly looking for people to get out and recruit people into the armed forces. And they're targeting white men in particular, which is interesting. I think maybe because Black people tend to feel a certain kind of way about people who are called animals and so forth and so on. Talk to me. I've got about 2 minutes.
I think that we've had a drop in recruiting over the past several years, actually the last couple of decades, since 9/11 when it really peaked. My sister actually does soldier retention for the Army. Has been doing that for 20 years, and she talks a lot about this. And I think part of it is replenishing many of those soldiers who are from that Iraq War, Afghanistan War, War on Terror era, who are now in their late 30s into their early 40s, and it's about time for them to transition out of the military, trying to refill those coffers with people. They've talked about lowering standards. They've talked about changing the physical requirements because Gen Z just isn't as fit as millennials and Gen X and baby boomers before them. It's just a physical fact. But I don't think the American people have any appetite to hop directly into a war when we just ended the Afghanistan war in 2021. If you look at the amount of blood and treasure that we've spilled on Middle Eastern soil over the course of the past 40 years, I think it's going to be a very difficult sell for any administration, be it President Biden or President Trump or anyone else, to convince the American people to return to war in the Middle East for any reason. And we're seeing across the globe calls for diplomatic solutions. We had 300,000 people in the streets of Washington, D.C., nearly 500,000 in the streets of London. over 1 million in the streets of Ankara in Turkey. We're seeing a worldwide movement calling for an end to this. I don't think that America is in a place right now where we could either afford politically or economically a full-blown region-wide war in the Middle East.
I mean, doesn't Turkey have 4 million boots they can put on the ground? I mean, they've got the largest army over there, right? Oh, yeah. So we're not ready for that. Everybody. Call us at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. That's WCPT. I want you to call me. I want to hear your thoughts about where we are, because, I mean, boy, if you could have said 2 or 3 months ago that we'd be here, that the critique of Israel would be what it is, that the support for Palestinians would be what it is, that the American electorate would be further electrified about so many issues, I wouldn't have been able to call it. But here we are. What about you? Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Okay, everybody. You know, they're saying that our conversation off air is different than the conversation we have on air. Do you think that's true, Dwight? Reverend Yuri?
Sometimes.
Well, only because I can say bullshiggity.
Hi, Miss Jackson. Do you want me to get Attorney Fancher?
No, hold on one second. Oh, no, please. Man, don't you take my show away from me. I have to get you out of here. Get you out of here. Talking all this junk, trying to use an excuse to cuss. You can't make this stuff up.
The amazing thing to me is that I don't know who schedules these Republican debates, but it seems they just will try to make sure that whenever things are going kind of the worst for the president or the worst for Democrats, that they can roll these people out there and remind everybody, like, they're crazier, right? Because given all the poll numbers, given the Republicans losing on Tuesday, you see that debate, you're like, there's no way we can turn the keys back over to these people.
I mean, wait a minute. What about the 3-inch heels? Before I heard the debate, because I had to hear the debate in replay, I thought of your friend Vivek was talking about Ron DeSantis and his heels.
Well, he was talking about both. If you listened, he kept bringing up Ron DeSantis' heels. I told people from the beginning that he was just doing a Borat character, and my conservative friends didn't believe me. And now they're like, "Why did they even let him on stage?"
Oh, I said, "Why are they making something over this man's heels? They are terrible. They just don't stop." It's almost like your friend Vivek is comic relief. This Joker is unbelievable. What? Oh.
Yeah. This is the thing. Vivek is a very smart and very rich person. He knew from the beginning he could not be president and he was not going to win. He was always running to make a point. And right now he's doing this whole faux populism thing because he's going to monetize it as soon as he drops out of the race. So he knows what he's doing.
Well, what is he doing? Help me.
Well, he's creating a brand. He's creating a rebel brand, and he's using these debates as basically soft launches for it. So he wants to be this anti-establishment, next generation Republican figure. He has enough money to put a real media apparatus around it and behind it. He's running to. He understands that the leaders of the Republican Party right now are Mitch McConnell, who's about to reboot any minute. Donald Trump, who's 77 years old, will more than likely be in prison, and there's going to be a real power vacuum within the Republican Party. And this B squad that he's on the stage with doesn't really have a future. So there's really a place for him in 2028 or 2032 to make a real run at it. So he's building his brand right now for that.
Well, what about Tucker Carlson? You and everybody. That was interesting.
He's smart. Think about the people he called out. So Vivek called out the biggest conservative media figure, Tucker Carlson, the richest conservative media figure who owns his own social media network, Elon Musk, and the biggest conservative podcaster, Joe Rogan. He didn't just pull those names out of a hat. He was making a very clear point.
Now, okay, now that tickled your fancy, Reverend Dr. Yuri, Reverend Doctor.
Well, yeah. I mean, look. You're saying you say what's necessary to draw attention to you in the midst of a crowded field, right? But here's what the idea brings with it. If you throw that out there, Tucker Carlson does have a following. How far it extends, you don't know. But now you have a captive audience that may be in some way thinking that really does make sense of an idea, right? And in this day and age, it's not like you're necessarily looking for competency to become president of the United States. That went out the window a long time ago. And so it is because we're in this entertainment, in air quotes, mode, who's going to captivate our attention? Putting Carlson on the ticket is like when the former president said, maybe we should explore ways to shoot bleach in our veins to get rid of COVID, right? It is so asinine on its face, but
2 minutes.
It captures folks' attention, and now they're locked in to see, could it really get that bad that quickly? When in reality, I think Ramaswamy is actually, he's going to be the rod on the airplane that draws all of the electrical current so that the plane doesn't go down. And it keeps the field occupied talking about everything other than the front runner so that there's no substantive policy conversation about what they would do differently than the guy who's not coming on stage. And so in many ways, he's the distraction that's necessary so that the whole thing doesn't derail before the Iowa caucus. I think, this whole notion is expect them to say anything at any time, because if they really talk about the issues, you'll be asleep before the first commercial break because they don't have any substance to any great degree on the major issues that are affecting the country right now, particularly domestic policy. They're clueless.
Dwight?
Well, yeah. Well, what's the unsaid part of this is that the Tucker family, the Carson family, is richer than the Trump family.
Back in a minute.
They owe money. And they own Swanson, the food company. And so they can put, real resources in a campaign if he is the Republican choice. And he has such a huge base following, it kind of really cements a lot of those Republicans who are a little nebulous about Trump right now. It could be a real issue if he, if Trump buys into it and he buys into it. So I wouldn't dismiss it yet, particularly given the competition, all of whom sound a little nutty to me, a little bizarre. The Nikki Haley and the Santos, they are, as they try to, carve out their lane, they sound, to me, it's just personal, a little bizarre.
Bizarre how?
And this
stand by.
Well, hold on, because I would like for you to say that on the air. Hold that.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about these simmering tensions within the Democratic Party over is American-Israeli policy over Israel, and it seems like it's been long simmering. This is not new, everybody. So let's talk about it and let's figure out how. Ultimately, you want to have peace. I'm going to have some of these young Jewish activists on in the coming days. Jewish Voice for Peace, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is. Please don't conflate the right-wing government of Netanyahu with all people who are Jewish. It's just not true. It's just like black people are not monolithic. Can you say Clarence Thomas? Okay, so shut that down. There's some people who really don't agree with what's happening overseas. They don't agree with the slaughter, the genocide of the Palestinians, and they want it to stop. And not only do they want it to stop, they want justice. Not only do they want justice, they want them to have their land. So let's think about that. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. And I'm coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Fred Eichner, Katie Dans, and Mark Pinsky, and Matt Cummings, and Melissa, and Steve, and all my people there, Vidalia, and Antonio. I just want to thank you all so much because you make this happen. Henry and my team on the Santita Jackson Show, and Alex and Paul and Devin. The kind of talk that we're able to share over the airwaves is what some people would call dangerous talk. I have a lot of people call me and say, "Hey, you're very courageous." I'm like, I don't know anything else to do. It's just the truth, and I want to share it, or the facts, and I want to share it. And I just want to thank this station for being bold enough to let me and Joan Esposito and Patty Vasquez have our say and have this platform. This is a big, big, big thing, and you should call them and let them know how much you appreciate the fact that they do believe in free speech. So let's get to some of these headlines on the Santita Jackson Show, because I want to get to Dwight McKee, and I want to get to Reverend Dr. Todd Deary and Robert Patillo, so we can find out about these tensions and how these tensions in the Democratic Party over the Israel-Palestine conflict will impact the peace process, will impact election 2024. 5 candidates clashed in last night's Republican primary debate, of course. Former President Trump, the front runner by a long shot, was not there. They addressed the Israeli-Gaza war, abortion, and the opioid crisis. A court ruled that former President Trump, can appear on Minnesota's primary ballot. The Minnesota Supreme Court said the former president can be on the primary ballot in March, but it did not rule out striking him from the general election ballot. And tens of thousands of Palestinians are fighting in northern Gaza. The Hollywood actors, yay! They reached a deal with studios to end their strike. The work stoppage disrupted work in Hollywood for months. They won the largest minimum wage increase in 40 years. Go on, Fran Drescher. She's the head of that union. She's been brilliant. New residuals for streaming shows they will get, and protections against the use of AI. They were going to be paid $100. They will. The studios wanted to pay them $182 to use their voices and their likenesses into perpetuity and not pay them anymore. They said, I don't think so. In Chicago, we're going to have it's going to be kind of cool today, but it's November, everybody. 55 degrees and sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 46 degrees, partly sunny. Let's pray for the Bears tonight. They're going to be playing the Panthers at 7:15 p.m. In the NBA, the Suns 116, the Bulls 115, the Timberwolves 122, the Pelicans 101. You know, before we talk about Speak with the Economist, Dr. Max Wolf. We've been talking about wealth and what's adding to it, what's taking away from it. The economy, this slowdown, the credit card debt, all of our debt, it's too much, everybody. And not owning a house really is cutting into the wealth of Americans. You know, saving 20% is a whole lot, particularly when you just don't have it to save. Payday to Monday is how most of us live. But Team Hochberg has an answer for you. If you want to purchase a new home, hear me. You only need 1% down. They have a special program. No private mortgage insurance. 1% down. If the house is $100,000, you only need $1,000. If it's $200,000, you only need $2,000. But you have to qualify for this program. So I want you to call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com and find out about this program. I'm going to have David back on so that he can talk about this program, because this is very exciting to me. Up until now, saving for a down payment was the largest challenge facing homeowners, and it is even more true today. So Team Hochberg now has a loan to help you, the listeners at WCPT and AM 950 Radio and all around the country, who qualify to overcome this challenge with this new 1% down payment loan. It sounds too good to be true, but it isn't. It is not. They want to help you. Team Hochberg wants to help you, your family, your friends, your coworkers, and your neighbors, everyone within the sound of my voice. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, and talk to them. I think it's good to go online to 56david.com, but I really think you need to call them and tell them, give them your background and see if you qualify for this program. Hey, if you don't call, you won't get into the program. If you do call, you just might. So if you're purchasing a new home, do yourself a favor, call Team Hochberg and see if you qualify for this new 1% down program with no private mortgage insurance. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or visit 56david.com. They are your equal housing lender. Everybody, we're talking about, boy, oh boy, talk about the sands shifting. Everything has just shifted. Before I get back to this wonderful panel that I have, let me go to Mama D. Mama D, what's on your mind today? Is Mama D there?
Yes.
Okay, Mama D, what's on your mind?
Well, how are you? Good to see you. How's your father?
Oh, thank you so much. He and my mother are doing well. They're resting very comfortably. Thank you so much for asking. I was with him yesterday.
I didn't know she was sick.
Well, they are married.
I didn't know she was.
No, she's not sick, but she does have COVID.
Oh, okay.
You know, I mean,
the
she's, you know,
one. I get it.
Just a little down that they kind of do these things in tandem, bless their hearts. She was like, can you believe this? I said, yeah. So, but she's resting very comfortably. Thank you so much.
The sweetheart couple. The sweetheart couple.
Oh my gosh, you don't want to be sweet on that, but okay. They've been together 62 years, so what can I tell you?
Absolutely. Well, you know, as a Crimes Against Humanity descendant, Jim Crow genocide survivor, and member of untreated hard mind subjugated race poverty damage, from 1866 to 1954, American laws of segregation that only existed to keep the status of the Negro down, not everybody, but status of the Negro down, that was straight up apartheid. So how can anybody be censored for telling the truth when lying tongues destroy the body and the soul?
Are you speaking of Congresswoman Tlaib out of Detroit and the censure she just received?
And being the only Palestinian, you know, in Washington, but I just don't get why it is that NAA's Indigenous Native American Africans keep lying about America. Segregation laws lasted 88 years, and the Supreme Court is what said it was unconstitutional because it only existed to keep the status of the Negro down.
You're right, but Mama D, what does that have to do with Rashida Tlaib?
Well, she told the truth about apartheid. The segregation laws were straight up apartheid.
Well, hold on. I mean, Robert Patillo, why don't you speak to what Mama D is saying? I mean, and how do you think this is going to? I think this is strengthening Rashida Tlaib in her hometown in Detroit, because she's very popular. I like her a whole lot. And people forget Robert and Dwight McKee and Reverend Geary. Her grandmama has been living over in Gaza. I mean, she was directly descended from there. Robert.
I think Rashida Tlaib has officially launched her campaign for governor in a couple years for the great state of Michigan, because you're right that this censure resolution, one, being sponsored by Marjorie Taylor Greene, should have made it dead on arrival, because we know this woman is crazy. But also the basis of it, if you read it, is that they're censuring her for making statements that they deem to be against the interest of a U.S. ally. Well, Ukraine is a U.S. ally. So the same people who are censuring Rashida Tlaib for making statements that are against the policies of the Netanyahu right-wing Israeli government are the same people who make comments against Zelensky and his government. So if you can censure her for that, you could censure the entire Freedom Caucus for the statements they've made. It's complete political nonsense. And for all of those people in the streets, all those hundreds of thousands of activists who are standing up, for Muslim Americans, for African Americans, for anyone who is part of a downtrodden and disenfranchised and oppressed group, she now becomes that clarion voice, and she becomes that very clear call. She becomes that example of a congresswoman who doesn't care about the political establishment and what is popular, but is interested in doing what is right for herself, her family, her children. I wish we had someone with the courage of Rashida Tlaib to stand up and talk about reparations. I wish we had somebody with the courage of Rashida Tlaib to stand up and talk frankly about criminal justice reform, and not say we're going to go along and get along and maybe in 5 or 6 elections we'll get to it. She's talking about doing it right now, and that courage will be rewarded by the voters. She set herself up nicely for a future in the Democratic Party, and I think that she's really taken over the leadership of the quote-unquote squad. Initially, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got most of the attention. She's young, she's attractive, she has a great backstory, but just the passion of Rashida Tlaib has really pushed her to the forefront of the progressive movement.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and she has stepped ably into the shoes of, or into the space of John Conyers. And, I saw them trying to run, many Black Democrats trying to run someone against her. And I said, I hear you. I said, but I love her politics. I said, and if I lived in Detroit, with all due respect, I'd support her because I think she's just a real progressive and a woman of real courage. I love it. And her grandmama lived over in Gaza, y'all. Can you imagine your grandmother having to live with that? Before October 7th, it would have been a horror. Oh my gosh. It breaks my heart. Yes, I'm sorry.
The other problem they got with that is that the reason they censor her is because the buzzwords is from the river to the sea. And they say that whenever you say that, you imply genocide. And that you don't have really the right to say that the Palestinians are going to win this from the river to the sea. That's why they censor her. That's why they fired Lamont. That is the buzzwords right now. But yet, every football game, we sing from sea to shining sea, which is also an extension of genocide. Is that when we talk about America the Beautiful from sea to shining sea, the ones that lived in between those two seas were the natives who got wiped out in the process. And these young people see the contradiction. They see the inconsistency. They understand the hypocrisy in this. And that's one reason they're so reactionary, because they see one apartheid state justifying another apartheid state under the guise of democracy and security. And they're just not having that hypocrisy anymore.
No, they're not. They are not. Let me go to Anita. Anita, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Santita.
Hey.
How could you say you were shocked? You wouldn't believe it. Your father's been working on Martin Luther King's plan to have a real democracy where everybody has a voice and a fingerprint. How could you say you wouldn't believe this would be happening? That's the democracy working. And thanks to your God, which your father, using the civil rights movement, it's the only living blood in this country. Democrat and Republican, it brings dead men. Civil rights brings alive men and life. So why are you shocked that
I'm not shocked?
you see that?
Look, that's colloquial. I'm not shocked by anything. I know that if you keep at it long enough, what do they say? Malua Continua, the struggle continues. Victory is certain if you continue in the struggle. But it is shocking, just given the politics of this post-World War II America, to see a shift. It's just, I remember when we were campaigning with Reverend in 1984, I flew out to be with my father in, I think it was Colorado. And we're going to these campaign events, Okay, so you're going, and you had a lot of people. I will never forget Anita and Dwight McKee and Reverend Dr. Yuri and Robert Patillo walking into a stadium with of 100,000 plus people. That never made the national news. I mean, the Secret Service, their minds were blown, and they were all there to hear Reverend Jesse Jackson. It's amazing.
Santita.
It's not that you don't think these things can ever happen, but when you see them manifest, you go, "Oh wow, wow, look at that." That's all I'm saying.
Santita. Santita.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Hello.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I want to make sure I hang up. I got an important point for Robert Patillo and White.
Quickly, I've got a minute for you.
Real
Go
quick.
on.
Okay, it's real quick. Wars D. Muhammad, which was Elijah Muhammad's son, which took off into the more orthodox, way the Muslim practice overseas.
Right.
Okay, right. He was about to pass. I saw him 3 weeks before he passed. On the spur of the moment, I happened to run into him, and I asked him what to say about this peace and all of this, and he told me Turkey wants to have something to do with the process of the peace that's going on. And I said, "You going to say something?" He said, "No, you say it." So I'm telling you, like I told Cliff Kelly when he first told me, that's what he told me as a Muslim, leader. And you're fired because on the air again that you're you're going to get fired.
No, it's not that I'm shocked. The thing is, no, I am. And it's always a pleasant surprise to see the change that you've been fighting for take place. That's all. I mean, it's not that I'm unbelieving. If I didn't believe, I wouldn't continue to fight. That's why you keep hope alive. That's why you have faith. But when God gives you the breakthrough, you go, whoa, look at that. But I've got about 3 minutes left in this segment, and I want to get these brilliant persons to be able to say what they need to say. Reverend Dr. Yuri, it seems like the sands are shifting. Just every day it's something new. I mean, Andre Carson said Debbie Wasserman Schultz is a coward and a punk. He said, "Don't you dare insult me." Oh my gosh. And the fact that it's become public is a lot.
Right. I mean, it's the palace intrigue that's now becoming publicly known, right? I think that's the piece. I think the sands have been where we find ourselves. I don't know that there's necessarily been a whole lot of shifting. There's always been a bit of skepticism behind this whole escalation and what it's led to. I think it is now becoming much more part of the public discourse, not just the political discourse. And those two things are not aligned. But when we think about the warfare, this is real quick because I want to go back to that point, is boots on the ground is not this next war. Remember, just within the last day or so, a U.S. drone was shot down over Syria. It is that level of fighting, the technological warfare where you can fight this war from a distance, that is part of the danger of it being escalated. Because when you think of where the drone bases are, situated in Northern Africa and in the Middle East, that's where the U.S. has to walk a delicate line to avoid having to put boots on the ground. Because if the technology is removed, the presence is removed, and it's kind of the detached hand that's kind of driving a lot of this conflict on behalf of the United States government. So we got to keep both eyes open, not just one eye. You got to be able to watch all the parties and the players, because I believe the land grab is well underway, as Big Brother White's been telling us, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon.
Well, the greatest source of wealth in the world is land ownership, which is why America has been so important, and there's been such a push, really, since the end of the 19th century, to take those rights back from you. Increasingly, you can own your house, but not the land underneath it, which is very, very dangerous for Americans. That's what's made us different. We are about the only major industrialized nation that allows land ownership. Dwight McKee and then Robert Patillo. Dwight McKee, 1 minute.
Well, I think that I was listening to the debate last night. We Republicans are stuck in 1950, 1960. This is not the world that came out of World War II. This is a world now that is of much more equals. This is not Roosevelt. and Stalin, Churchill sitting down, cutting the deal, dividing the world between themselves. These people, they have real competition now for militarism, for technology, for resources, for investment, and for people's own cause for liberation. And so I think they're miscalculating when they say things like, we're going to support Israel at any cost, and if Syria gets out of hand, we're going to bomb them. If Iran say the wrong thing, we're going to bomb them. The world does not work like that anymore. It's a little more complicated. And for Anita's question about Turkey, Turkey used to be the Ottoman Empire, and there was the Ottoman Empire that they actually stole Palestine from and set up the state of Israel. And so when he talks about Turkey is going to be involved, Turkey was heavily invested in that area of the world. It was their empire that the British divided in order to extract Palestine out of that for Israel. I think that's what the Imam was talking about.
Absolutely.
But I really think that if we don't reorientate ourselves, we're going to jump on a horse that's going to end up riding us.
Robert Patillo, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to give Robert the last minute because I got to hurry out to this break.
Okay, Robert.
Robert, 1 minute.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback off of what Dwight was saying, that he's absolutely correct, and we're seeing a sea change in the world. To his point, Turkey is producing the world's largest drone army. If you look at the Bayraktar TB2s that are being used in Ukraine, they're creating stealth drones. They're literally creating an entire drone air force in Turkey. So the U.S. needs to understand that regardless of your strategic power, we've seen what Ukraine has been doing with drone boats against multi-billion-dollar submarines and battle cruisers in the Black Sea. We don't want to be drawn into this war. Therefore, a ceasefire is the best option for the entire global community.
Hey, every ceasefire now, everybody. What do you think? And what about the economy? We're going to talk with Dr. Max Wolf about that in just a few minutes. Economic slowdown. Is a recession here already? Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a moment. Thank you all so much. If you want to stay on and hear Dr. Wolf or interact with him, you're more than welcome to.
I always learn so much from Robert and from Yuri. I mean, they be on top of this thing.
Dwight, that point that you made about from the river to the sea and from sea to shining sea, I am absolutely stealing that. I'm going to just pretend that I thought of it.
It's not theft if you tell them it's going to happen.
Said the preacher. Okay, that's what y'all do. First time give them credit. I heard somewhere.
I saw you on Rolling Shit the other day, Robert. You were phenomenal, Doc.
Hi, Miss Jackson. We have Dr. Wolf ready to go.
Okay, we've got Dr. Wolf with us. Dr. Wolf, how are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Dwight McKee, Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri, and of course, the Right Reverend, oh no, that's right, he's attorney, Robert Patillo. How you doing?
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning.
How you doing, Doc?
Good morning.
Let's talk about this economic slowdown, y'all. Let's talk about it. I don't know how. I mean, look, everybody I know is feeling the pinch. Everybody I know.
You want a definition of economic slowdown?
Oh my gosh. What is it?
The Bears versus the Panthers.
Ooh, you know what? You are mean. Talking about that tired team.
I didn't say it on air. It's like we're on the social media side, so I stay behind the firewall. I'm behind the curtain.
I've been crunchy with the Bears since they would not give Walter Payton the ball during the Super Bowl. I said, this man carried your sorry butts on his back for his whole career. Mike Ditka, you can't figure out letting him carry the ball in one time to do a touchdown? Forget you. Yeah, I said it.
You might date yourself a tiny bit with that reference.
I don't care. I'm mad. I grew up with these awful Bears. They were awful.
2 minutes.
And I was furious. Furious.
Have you ever thought about using the Super Bowl Shuffle song as a lead into your show?
Come on.
It was a fantastic piece of music, too.
It was great. And I'm going to tell you, it lit Chicago up because we were just so happy to actually have a winning team. Like, really? What? Whew. And they went in and did the thing, and then look at what happened. Look at these people. They were not right. I really thought what they did to him was not right. It was not right. And Mike Ditka had, there were issues. So are you guys still there? Are you going to be here? Dwight, Robert.
Yeah, I'm just listening.
I'll be around.
Okay, very good. Well, feel free to interact. Did Todd Urey go off to court? Maybe.
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
But the jury has the Marilyn Mosby case today, so I'm kind of on jury watch. They start deliberation this morning.
So what do you think is going to happen with Marilyn?
I think if the jury follows the law, she'll be acquitted. If they go for what the government wants, which is
back in 30,
the criticism and the scorn, they may come away. But I like the way the jury pool looked. I was in court yesterday. It's a balanced jury. I don't think even most of the folks I saw the panel. I think there are 12 actual jurors. I can't tell who the 3 alternates were based on how they were sitting, but. I think she has a federal public defender now. They basically wiped her out economically to try to
stand by.
Wouldn't allow her to raise money for her defense fund. It has caused great pain. But she's doing all right.
Talk about that because they went after the
All right.
Stand by.
We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
To a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. You know what time it is. It's time for us to talk with Dr. Max Wolf. Love him, brilliant economist. As we talk about credit card debt, wow. As we talk about this economic slowdown, many people are wondering. Look, practically speaking, a lot of people feel inflation every day. Your paycheck might be bigger, but it doesn't go as far. Go to the grocery store. Look at that. People are not buying homes. The interest rates are so high. And so Forbes had an interesting headline, recession or soft landing. What's next for the U.S. economy? And so I just have to ask you, what is next for the U.S. economy? What is an economic slowdown? Are we in one? And what does that mean to us, to the average person?
Yeah, so it looks like we are unambiguously slowing down, right? And a slowdown can just mean you grow less, and it can mean that you have an actual recession, right? So slowdowns just mean less sort of economic activity. They don't necessarily mean stagnant or negative growth, right? So you can have a slowdown without a recession. It's worth saying that. Sometimes the word slowdown has been used as a euphemism for a recession, and it's confused the public into thinking that they're the same thing, right? Because if you kind of want to say there's a recession without causing the alarm or possibly being blamed, if you're in political office for that recession, you call it a slowdown, right? And that's led to a certain amount of confusion. But technically, they're not the same. The one does not automatically entail the other, right? What we've seen is two things. We've seen a lot of reassurance and sort of upside surprise in the market that things have stayed strong. And by things, I basically mean consumer spending and employment. And those are kind of leading indicators that we spend a lot of time looking at, or lagging indicators at time, but leading in importance, where we spend a lot of time looking at those factors: employment, underemployment, wage growth, and spending, because they're such a big part of the economy, about 2/3 of the economy. And that's kind of how we measure the health often, or at least a big way that we measure the health. Those numbers have been good. The unemployment continues to be pretty low. There's a lot of job openings, less than there were, but still a good number of job openings. Still lots of service and other areas where it's pretty hard to attract and retain a candidate if you're hiring. So that's usually a sign of some strength in the market. And consumer spending has been pretty good, right? So that's been the sort of counterfactual. That's been the, hey, don't worry, things are okay. underneath that are all kinds of differences by region. Some regions doing better than others, by income class, by socioeconomic group, by race, by foreign-born versus domestic, male-female. There's lots of ways to break up the data, right? And if you break up the data along these lines, you often get a different answer than the overall average answer, right? Probably telling a listening audience knows that pretty well, and perhaps with some pain. But nonetheless, it was good to remind folks. What we've seen, though, which is interesting, is people are keeping up their spending, but they're keeping up their spending by first going through their savings and now increasing their indebtedness a lot. And that causes two things that we pay attention to. One, that strongly suggests that keeping the spending up is running out of gas, right? Because you can only spend your savings once, and you can only run up your credit card debt toward the limit so many times before your spending is going to come down, not by choice, but by necessity, right? And so we are nearing that point for a lot of households, so that catches our eye quite a bit. And then we're starting to see some other things like borrowing against 401ks and such, which normally, because it's pretty expensive with a tax penalty, and it sort of takes from the future to survive the present, sort of strongly suggests to us a lot of households making very difficult and painful decisions, right? And that's also highly consistent with at least a slowdown, right? And then I would add that I think, to me, the unwritten sorts of the stories about what's changing in the world is there's a pretty major protectionist surge in the American public mind, whether that's Ukraine or the Middle East or anything, right? That usually means people feel vulnerable at home and undercared for by the government. I think that always gets missed. And then I think even looking at some really radical shifts in opinion in the American sensibility lately, and what Americans sort of think about political issues across the spectrum, the American public seems to be increasingly sees itself as an underdog, as disadvantaged, as afflicted, and sort of sees commonalities, often that are real and sometimes that are imaginary, with other groups, right? That's true on the far right, the far left, and increasingly in the general public. So I think we have a public whose sensibility is starting to be consistent with a slowdown or recession, and we have macroeconomic data numbers, indebtedness, some weakening in the job market, although it's still strong, and then just households who look like they're going to hit the hard limit, right? Last thing I'll mention is budgets. We usually talk about soft limits and hard limits. Soft limits are, you really shouldn't be doing this, but you bite the bullet and do it maybe as a choice. That's the soft limit. The hard limit is you can't do this anymore because you're living by raising your credit card limit, and the credit card company and your friends at the bank say, enough, Bob, enough, Jane. You're at the line, right? And last thing we also know is when someone offers you credit, if they offer you credit, one of the main calculations that they look at is how much of the total credit made available to you, how much that the banking system has said you can borrow, how much of that have you borrowed? And as you get closer and closer to that limit, you would probably need or want your credit limit raised to continue to outspend your income. But that's exactly when the financial institutions tend to pull the plug because they start to get nervous about your ability to pay all the money in full and on time.
After they've extended the credit. I mean, how is a consumer supposed to win? Just how? How can
win what?
Just win? I mean, just make some money. We don't have savings now, Max. And then you get a credit card. If you keep up with the payments, they continue to extend your limit, and you're spending more money, which means you actually have less money. It just feels like we're being gamed here.
Yeah, I mean, people do tend to take these things personally. They're more structural than personal, if that helps. And taking, your place in the economy personal is likely, however understandable, to make you so angry you're dysfunctional and your choice set becomes poor. Because lots of people think they're powerful when they're angry, but the evidence about decision-making when you're angry, most of the decisions people make when they're really angry, they regret, right? So, and this is not about any singular group of people. It's about the human organism, right? So I do understand that. I'd urge people not to take it personally, because I think that's when you watch people right now, this is the age of the algorithm getting you to take everything personally because it's great clickbait and you go into a rage spiral, and that's great for advertising to get you on a topic. It's terrible for your understanding of the world and drives atrocious decisions.
I understand, but
So I think
no, you're right. But being broke is personal, and so because so many people are broke at the same time. I mean, the question is ultimately, what's the plan? How can the American consumer win?
Sure.
Because when I'm in the store
Sure.
and when I'm talking to people, they are angry. They are
Oh,
angry
yeah.
that
No, I noticed.
that they can't buy enough
Yeah.
food. They can't buy the right food. They are angry, and you
Yep.
see corporations
Look, I live
making
in
more
Brooklyn.
money than ever. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I mean, and you're married with a child. I mean, and so you've got corporations making more money than ever before. But I'm living from payday to Monday.
I understand. To me, the gauge of the public sentiment, the best one for New York is how many people look like they're thinking about killing someone else on your subway car. It's a good one. It's never zero. It's never zero. And it might not be the people you think. That's what New York keeps you on your toes. Yeah, that old lady might be the one to give you the shit, right? You never know. But yeah, you got to see how many people are doing that or looking at you the way dogs look at meat. That's the other way you kind of gauge the economy. So those kind of informal gauges, yeah, of course.
Well, wait a minute.
They always light up.
No,
right?
wait a minute, Dr. Wolf. Let me ask Dwight McKee, because Dwight McKee is the dean of the Ma'afa Project, which is and it's an educational and from social, political, cultural, academic program for some young people who they are saving, and they're dealing with no money. No money. I mean, Dwight, what are you hearing? I mean, and what are these young people hearing? And particularly people who grew up with no money and there's no hope of really getting any money, at least in the so-called legitimate economy.
Well, the challenge is not having no money. The challenge is the reality of maybe never having money.
Ever.
And so, if you see a way out, then you got a program, you got a plan to work your way out of debt or to work your way into parts of the economy. Then there is some energy there. But if you can't afford tuition, you can't go to school. Your schools are closed. In the high school, you don't have a diploma. The job market closes down on you. You see other folk come in and take jobs that ordinarily you could have had. Then it becomes a hopelessness, and that's when it becomes dangerous, because that hopelessness then becomes desperation. And it's a desperation that's driving a lot of this crime. If you see your only future as ramming your truck into a store and stealing the merchandise, running out, selling it on eBay, if you see that's your only way out, that's a desperation that the culture and society won't be able to survive, because that creates an eternal dynamic that nobody has an answer to. If your reality tells you that your only way out is to go and hijack somebody's car and go sell the parts to the car, if that's the only future you see, then that explains the chaos and the bedlam that everybody wakes up to every day. That's not spreading to places that historically you didn't have to deal with that, because that's where they see the money being now. That's where they see the cars with the most value being now. And so that pain has become much more democratized.
Well, I mean,
because the options have become much more limited.
I mean, and this is how and where people are living. I do. This is what I'm seeing. So I mean, so how do we get through this? What do we do? And particularly in an election season, I mean, is there a question that we should be asking the people running for office? I mean,
well, we have to create options and opportunities for these people. But if all your money is invested in war, in the war machine, and there's no money for domestic opportunities, then what are the kids working with? What do they have to look forward to?
Well, Dr. Wolf,
I mean, if $7 of every $10 is going to drop a bomb, on somebody, then your only option is to join the Air Force and participate in dropping bombs on people, then it is the recipe for disaster for any society. It is exactly what took the Roman Empire down. It's what takes every empire down.
Absolutely. 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 I mean, Dr. Wolf, what say you?
So I do think so this is a hallmark of empire, and all empires do this, both when they're alive and when they're dead. And empires do rot and die, but it's a slow process. And to steal the Mark Twain quote, the news of the decline of the American empire has been announced an awful lot of times. It will be true one day. There are lots of signs of decline, but that's come and gone before, right? So to go back to it, I think you have to be personally responsible. So I agree, but I don't think it's you. So I think this is important, maybe because I am an economist and I have a structural training. And I know that can make me sound strange in these conversations, right? And there may be other problems that cause me to sound strange too, but that could be a big one, right? But it isn't you that you're poor. It isn't really you that there's no place for you in the economy. It's a structure. The harder you work, the better you do. You could be one of the small number of people who escape. And in your life story, that's everything. I get it. And stay disciplined and follow the path, for sure. It is your only bet, but it is not a great bet because of the role you have in the economy. And I guess this is going to be upsetting to people. It always is when I say this, and I don't mean any personal disrespect or any disrespect for the Herculean and impressive things people do to pull themselves up. I'm not trying to rain on that, right? I do think that's amazing. But I think if you have 999 roles that stink, for people who are not born rich, and one role that's good, it ain't just you if you end up in the 999. It is a social problem, right? Now, do you need to do the right thing? Yes. Does that mean it's okay to hurt someone and take their stuff? No. Does that mean that if you get high to escape the pain, you're going to do well? No, right? All these things people walk through, the fire people walk through to be the successes, yeah, I'm impressed by that. But I think the hardest thing to do in all this is to keep your humanity. And I think when that goes, everything goes. And then it doesn't matter even if you make it. You're not there to enjoy it anymore. And so to me, what happens out there is the rich and the poor, they lose their humanity together. Everyone becomes the other, the evil, right? You see it in the politics. You see it in the protests. You see it in every social movement and every political debate, right? Everyone wants to be on one of the sides against the other side, and that becomes their identity. And then you start to trade the indignities, right? And then things really implode. The injustices are terrible, but I don't know if they're individual. And I think societies that are built on some basic injustices survive because they teach people that their crappy social position is their decision making. And I think if we kind of pull the onion back a little bit and say, no, it's a social role, and you have to fight like crazy to try to get out of it. And you still should, and that's still heroic. But is that a reasonable prospect? To 1,000 young black men, 1,000 young black women, is it okay to say your dignity will be questioned and you'll fight twice as hard your whole life to be the one in 1,000, and then we'll all talk about how deviant the other 999 are? Is that an okay social arrangement? I would be inclined to the position no, right? But part of what I'm saying is we do not pick our destiny in a vacuum. When the society turns on us, it's rarely us. And when the society exalts us, by the way, it's rarely us, right? It's the position you find yourself occupying at a moment in a world you didn't make. And you still have to do everything you can to be in the right position at the ride, whatever the trip up or down is, to hold your dignity, right? But I just think that's more the challenge. And I realize I have a somewhat secular background, so sometimes I don't use the language that other people use. But I think when I've tried this, while I have offended some people with this explanation, I think it resonates. I think people kind of already know it.
Absolutely. Robert, I don't think this is offensive. I don't think his analysis is offensive. Do you?
No,
No, but I just think it's so antithetical to all the lies we've been told and the propagandizing that we've had. I was on a program recently with one of those wealth coaches who talked about, all the habits of millionaires and the things you need to do in order to become a millionaire. And that he goes around the country speaking to people and young people and said, you can't buy Starbucks, you can't go out at night, you can't have a nice car, you need to be sleeping 4 hours a night and sacrificing this, that, and the other. And in my mind, I'm thinking this is the same drivel we've been hearing for 40 years in this country. This idea that you're going to suffer your way into now, of course, we don't need to be spendthrifts, and we don't need to be irresponsible. We don't all need a Gucci belt and a new Bentley at all. But at the same time, most millionaires and billionaires, a lot of their money came from inheritance. A lot of that comes from nepotism. We have to stop giving people this idea that we live in a meritocracy where you're just going to work your way into wealth. If that was the case, then that bus driver who's been working 13-hour shifts for the last 25 or 30 years will eventually work their way into being a millionaire or a billionaire. That's just not what. And instead of continuing to feed people this idea that the reason you're poor is just because you're not working hard enough, not sacrificing enough, and because you're lazy. No, we are in a system that is rigged against you. Me and my wife, we have a decent house over that we got over here in Baltimore. That we looked at the black folks who live around us, or college professors, and work for the city government, and military veterans, etc. And then you look to the left of you and think, two 25-year-old white kids just moved in because they just bought the house cash. It is not because they are just somehow smarter and harder working. They have generational wealth that allows them to be in a place at 24 or 25 that black folks get to when they're 35 or 40 years old. And until we realize the inequities that are incumbent within this system, it's going to be very difficult to pull ourselves out of this. Chris Rock had a similar joke about that years ago, where he said he lives in a neighborhood with Mary J. Blige and with rappers and entertainers. He said the white guy who lives next to me is a dentist, just because that's the difference in wealth that exists in our communities and our neighborhoods. Until we take seriously breaking down this social structure that exists, it's going to be impossible to pull ourselves out of it, because part of the American ethos is this conceptualization that we're simply going to work harder, come up with an invention, come up with an idea, pull ourselves out of this. Yes, as Max says, that will work for the 1 in 1,000 of us. The rest of us are going to have to grind our way through a broken system that's meant for us to fail.
And and you're right, Max. That's why blaming ourselves. Like, wait a minute. Are you speaking of structural inequality?
Yeah, look, I do think there's personal responsibility, right? Like,
of course.
So I don't want to. That's usually where I offend people. I do think that the choices you make and the sacrifices people make, which are heart-wrenching, I get it. I'm not trying to disrespect that, right? But what I'm saying is, sometimes it feels, I think, to a larger and larger number of people, like deck chairs in the Titanic. Like, you can get any chair you want, but you're staying on the boat, right? And at some point in the process, staying on the boat does not seem like the best option. And you get a lot of people fighting for what deck they're on the boat, and they get a little bit distracted from the boat and the condition of the boat, right? And if the boat goes down and you're on the boat, how much does your seat matter? And how important is it to have you fighting with other people for the seat on the boat and not on the lifeboat?
But Santita, I think the assumption is we
okay,
own
30
one
seconds
boat.
apiece. I've got to get Dr. Wolf to close out. Reverend?
Fine. The macroeconomic assessment assumes that there's microeconomic consistency. The realities that folks are dealing with that contributes to this racial wealth gap, they're not the same. And so the options are not equal. They're not equally distributed. They're not equally available. And so we have to be clear on that. Otherwise, the macroeconomic analysis is going to be flawed from the very beginning. And that's the whole thing. What folks are experiencing is not the same. And the impacts and the effects of shifts and shocks at the macroeconomic level are not evenly distributed. It just has never been that way in the United States.
Ever.
Yeah.
Dr. Wolf, the last
I would argue the following.
Mm-hmm.
Being a person who's marginalized, a person of color, sometimes an LGBTQ community, sometimes indigent, sometimes an orphan, sometimes a native person, sometimes just a poor immigrant without papers, whatever it is the equivalent of not having an immune system in a disease-rich environment, right? Everything is going to hit you faster, first, and harder, right? And then I do think the society has a sadistic streak where your afflictions begin to count against you as flaws. And I think that can be particularly cruel if some of those issues that you end up with are highly structural. And again, people make choices matter. It's all we can do as individuals. But I think I would argue, don't take it personal. Don't make it a rage story, because rage only makes you stronger, usually in the mindset of the most lethal forms of masculinity. And all that does is justify repression and expedite your troubles, right? So, and again, I want to say, there are people who walk through the fire amazingly unsinged and pick up other people and carry them through. That is heroism and deserves attention. But a lot of the decisions, quote unquote, that we make are made for us by the structures and the society we live in. And I think we'd be advised with hard times ahead to figure that out and not make it all about us and all about them. I don't think that leads to a productive place.
Well, Dr. Maxwell, hold on, hold that thought. I'm coming out, but stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel so that you can hear the finish of this conversation. It's quite fascinating because we can work it out. That's what the Beatles said, and that's it. We can work it out, particularly if we know what we're working with. I love everybody. Thank you, Henry, for a great show. God bless you. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. See you again. Dwight McKee?
I try to teach my kids, and they are from the bottom of society in terms of the economy of it all, is the difference between their fate and their destiny. Their fate is pretty much pre-programmed. They are fated to be at the bottom of the rung, to be highly unemployed, to come out of bad schools, to have families with no money and no real education. That's kind of locked in from day one. But their destiny is adjustable, that if you make some decisions and come up with the right plan, that you can kind of transpose your fate and change your destiny. And that's kind of what gives them hope. And then I help give them, me and J. Boo and Hatch, the rules and the tools by which they can help change their destiny by making different decisions, by giving them different challenges, and about exposing them to different options and opportunities that they didn't know that they had. Their limitation is not so much their talent. Their limitation is knowing what the options are and knowing what's available to them and how to access that. And so there is a dynamic that without that, then they are destined to be, they are fated. There's a fatalism in fate to be just like their parents were, just like their grandparents were, just like their children are going to be. But with these new opportunities and new options opening up for them, it gives them much more latitude to make new decisions, to create a different life for themselves. And I think that's where the breakdown is. And that's why I'm with Dr. Wolf. They can't take it personally because in many ways they were predestined to be who they are. And they didn't have a lot of choice in that, a lot of votes in that, because their area code, their complexion, the things that determine the choices that they've been exposed to, is kind of locked into the environment. It is our responsibility to expand it beyond their immediate exposure, to give them more options and opportunity to make different decisions within their own talent and if they can kick in.
No question. I mean, Reverend Dr. Uri, I hated to abbreviate your remarks, but why don't you, because you're in the middle of the community, working with these young people. I mean, we're watching someone who's been exalted. Who I mean, it's almost as if they shoot horses, don't they? You see a Marilyn Mosby, and she and her husband did everything right, and it's almost as if the system just has rejoiced in taking them down, taking them out. Reverend Dr. Uri.
Yeah, and even if they didn't do everything right, the inequities in
Yes.
the system are more
Would you
punitive
wait a minute? Would you say that one
to
more
them.
time, as if someone is perfect? What you say?
Yeah, even if they didn't do everything right, right? That's the whole point. When you put the full weight and force of the keeper of the empire, who holds the keys, who's the gatekeeper of the system and the structure, they then get to pick and choose. So, just to give you context, one of the prosecutors on the other side of the table in the Marilyn Mosby trial was my civil procedure professor in law school. And one of the things I remember him telling me, he was still an assistant U.S. attorney at the time. He said, everybody does something every day that could technically be a violation of federal law.
Absolutely.
The difference is the government gets to choose who they go after. So let's not lose sight of that, because the system is not weighted the same. There's not an even distribution of the burdens of choice. I get it. If I've got to cross over a gap between where I'm standing and where I'm going, if somebody else has a long enough board that will span the gap so they can walk over, I don't have any boards and I can't share their board. And now I got to figure out with how much effort over how much time I got to be able to cover the same distance. By the time I get to the other side, the gap has already widened. And what we've not set up in this system is a system of creating equilibrium for the dysfunction in the system that has pre-existed. As a matter of fact, I often think about Gunnar Myrdal's argument about cumulative causation. Now, it's not always necessarily the most well-liked economic theory, but there is a stacking of the benefits that happen over time that create more and more disadvantage. And to simply say, okay, now that we're here, let's start at the same spot. That's the difference between equality and equity. We want to have a system that fuels itself by inequity and only claims equality, when in reality, you must have equity in order to get to equality. Otherwise, it's all a ruse, and the inequities of the system, the inequalities of the system only get cumulative over time. And so generational wealth, when we have that conversation, the generations didn't start at the same place. They haven't been made equal. That's why the reparations discussion is such a critical conversation in all of this. And to say that we're going to be at this place now and continue to just apply the same old economic theoretical principles that guide the economy and create further inequities is just asinine. So, yeah, we teach folks how to be resilient in a system that is designed to be unfair. That's called survival. But if we're going to create a system that allows everybody to thrive, there has to be a revising, a revision of the way the system works, and a correction for the inequities that the system has reinforced by design. Otherwise, all we're doing is we're giving good talking points, but we're not creating substantive change.
Well, I want Dr. Wolf to speak to Karen Lene, because I think that she missed, I think, in all fairness, Karen, you missed his point. You said Dr. Wolf negated the fact that the black struggle is not the same as other groups, LGBTQ plus, people of color. Why don't you speak to that and clarify that, Dr. Wolf?
Sure, I do think that there's enormous uniqueness to the struggles of different people. People without papers to be here, people who are African American, people who are physically handicapped or suffer from mental illnesses. Everybody's journey is different, and most people occupy one or more of those classes of disadvantage, because they also tend to accumulate. So my point isn't to say they're different. They are. My point is to say the structural challenges are not unique to the individual, right? So the structural challenges are not that unique to the individual because they arise from a structure, not from individuals. And I think why I made that comment about how I often, anger people unintentionally is that if you take individuals, me, you, my group of people, your group of people, those group of people, as the unit, like where you build your understanding, that's an individuated theory, right? You build a theory around how people do and what people are like and how they interact or how their group interacts. That's perfectly legitimate and fine and insightful. If you see things from a more structural perspective, which I do, some things become more clear, some things become less clear, but I tend to look at roles, the roles different people occupy relative to how wealth is produced and distributed. And that's just not about them. It's about where they sit relative to the production and distribution of wealth, right? One thing I do think is it's easy in a society with old habits to talk about how women earn less than men or African Americans earn less than white people. But one thing you do learn from structuralism is those are accidents of history and injustice. There's nothing written into the code of a society. That's not a DNA thing. That's a social deal, right? Because even these categories of who's white and who's black are actually pretty fluid and totally socially fabricated. And we already know they're scientifically meaningless, right? Those are structures too, in my mind, right? I'm not saying it's illegitimate to have a disagreement, but often I can tell that I've both annoyed someone and possibly done a poor job of explaining my theory, which I've done before too, when whatever the knock is on sort of a structural perspective, and there are a lot of knocks on a structural perspective, I'm not trying to see the experience of an individual, right? That's just a different approach.
Well, hold on. I want Karen. Karen, sometimes you just need to call in, hon, because you miss things in the typing. And I've told you that before. And I mean,
yeah, and I may have done injustice to your question.
No, there's no question. But there's nuance. And you have a lot of really very interesting things to say, Karen. And Karen, you should call in more often than you do. You called in once. And so I'm going to read this one more time, but you need to do that. I mean, because then I can't get to other questions. I can't get to other comments following up with yours when you could just make a simple phone call and do it. He said, and she did, in follow up to what you just said, I did not miss his point. He is negating the fact that all is not equitable. The guest who followed him made my point. And my point with you is this is someone I've known a long time. And so as we've talked about structural inequalities, I met him through Kevin Gray, our very dear friend who passed away early this year. And Kevin said he's one of the economists who makes a lot of sense. I've not bumped into an economist who makes as much sense as Dr. Wolf does in a long time. This is someone who has been very, very sensitive to, and maybe I'm being very sensitive, and I'll cop to that, to someone who has worked with Black people and understands the struggles that we have. And sometimes people can mistake, but that's why I'm saying to you, call in. Call in.
I'm sorry you feel negated. I mean, to some extent, I think you're probably
honestly,
right, though.
I don't know until you call in, and then because we're missing too much. Too much gets lost in translation when you're typing, and so that's the end of that. But would your point was?
I can be overly philosophical, but I am negating all the people: white, black, green, red, purple, glowing, see-through, and not, to look at the structures. That's structuralism, right? And it's a weakness to some extent of the structural importance. But I do think that the role Black Americans have played in America is not preordained. It's not just, it's not right, it's not natural. Anyone else could have played the role too, and it would be just as toxic to them.
Absolutely.
It is a series of accidents. It doesn't belong to anyone because they're Black. The history does. The pain does. The traumas do. I'm not trying to sort of brush that off. All I'm saying is the role is completely accidental and arbitrary. There's nothing about being Black that in any way explains the position that Black Americans have been relegated to in American history. That's kind of how I know it's not just to have that, right? Again, a weird perspective that you're not used to, very structural. I get that.
Well, I mean, it's impersonal, right?
And just so that it's clear, I think that about white Americans, Mexican Americans, Jewish Americans, Polish Americans, people with disabilities, the LGBTQAI community. I think it's true for, that's just how I see it. You know what I mean? It's not unique to any one group.
Karen, next time call in and you can contribute more. I've got to let people go. I wish I could talk more, but I've got to care for my parents today. So part of that, and as the steward of this discussion, yeah, I lead it a particular way. So why don't you call in? I've encouraged you to do that. Call in, and you're at work. I got you, and I am too. But I got to go take care of two parents who need me today. So there's that.
Worthy work.
Oh,
And thanks for the comments. And maybe in the future there'll be a direct exchange.
absolutely. I mean, because I think that that's important. That's why I wish I could talk more. But I also, as I've shared with you, Karen, I'm at a decided disadvantage because when you don't call in, the pieces that I miss, I'm not perfect and I can't read your mind. So call in, as I've asked you to do many times. Call in. And then you can be understood fully because then you can follow up very quickly. Texting for me is not the shot. I'll tell you that right now. It's just not. It's just like say you like dating someone and saying I love you by text. That doesn't work. It just doesn't. There's some things you need to be in person to do. And the great thing about radio is that I'm not texting Dr. Wolf and Dwight McKee and Reverend Geary and Attorney Patillo. I'm talking with them. So if there's something that gets lost in translation, they can follow up and say, oh, I didn't mean that. This is what I meant. You can have that opportunity too, if you would call. I realize you're at work, but all you have to do is call. Because otherwise it's unfair to other people who want to weigh in on the show. And I've got to give you all the attention, which I don't mind giving you the attention. I just can't give it all to you. I can't give it all to anyone. And I think you understand that. If you sat in this chair, you would understand that. So I'm gonna give everybody some closing thoughts. Of course, Dr. Wolf, you will close out. But Dwight McKee, your closing thought? Okay, see people go. Reverend Dr. Yuri, are you there? Attorney Patillo, anyone still there? Okay.
I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm still here. Let Robert go first.
Okay, Robert.
I think the main thing we have to focus on keeping the pressure on our congressional representatives, giving strength and backup to people like Rashida Tlaib and the people who are pushing for peace. The military-industrial complex right now is like a pig in slop. They're selling weapons to Ukraine. They're selling weapons to Israel. They're selling weapons to Taiwan. That's one sector of the economy that is not suffering. However, if we want to refocus American dollars instead of spending $1 trillion a year on bombs, they're spending $1 trillion a year on education, healthcare, and all the needs of the American people. We have to stay engaged and not be silenced. Stand with those 100 staffers who walked out. Push your Congress people for peace.
Ceasefire now, everybody. Reverend Dr. Yuri.
Well, there's a ripple effect. I think we started with the conversation, and Dr. Wolf was always helpful. We had this conversation a few days ago about whether or not war stimulates the economy. And I think this is a new test. I think this economic reality is slightly different than the classic conditions that we would typically see, where industrializations and productivity being driven by human engagement is different. There's automation now. There's a tight, what they're arguing is a tight labor market. There's a war that doesn't really require the kinds of human participation, at least from the U.S. side. Certainly a lot of loss on the Israeli and the Palestinian side. This is a lot different. And you already had economic destabilization and inequality at home, even before Ukraine became a thing, even before the war became a thing. That's the reality of it. And that was never really resolved. We saw distribution inequities, both in terms of how medicine was distributed, how services were provided, how transportation was allocated throughout the pandemic. We saw all of that. And I think that's part of the overall cumulative causation. I think here's where you need a Max Wolf in the mix of it, is that you need someone that is looking at the system, the interrelationship of individual relationships, that helps us to kind of understand how do you get better, more out of the system. You're not going to necessarily, if there's no intent to redesign the system, reframe the system, re-engineer the system, you're not going to get equity and equality out of a system that wasn't designed for that. It was designed to protect interests. Interests are not equally valued in this structure, in this political climate, in this political reality. The system wasn't designed that way. And so with that in mind, we got to figure out, how do you overcome that? That was Dr. King's great effort. Certainly it continues to be our effort as those who are the legacy of that work. Reverend Jackson's work has always been calling out the inequities in the system. But if there's no systemic change, I don't think you get to any real substantive systemic outcomes.
And not Reverend Doctor. Oh boy, let me not do that to Dr. Wolf. Before you give your closing statement.
Not ordained.
Oh no, there's a movie that I saw years ago with Harry Belafonte and John Travolta. Did anyone see it? White Man's Burden. It was a wonderful film. And Dwight, you saw it? And what was fascinating?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it was. You need to see it. It's one of the most underrated films I've ever seen. You saw blacks and whites flip the social order. Black people were the imperialists, if you will, and white people were the formerly enslaved and all of that. I mean, it was just amazing to watch. I mean, Harry Belafonte was brilliant. He never got the credit that he deserved as an actor. And John Travolta, quite frankly, hasn't either. You just saw the pain that not being able to get ahead caused John Travolta. You saw it, and you saw the impact that poverty or just not being able to move forward had on his wife and children. And you saw the impact that privilege had on Harry Belafonte and his family. You saw that White Man's Burden. And so when Dr. Wolf, and please, Dr. Wolf, help me with this, when you say, wait a minute, these are like accidents of history, you know, if white people were put in this, I remember there's a man, he was one of my father's chief supporters in 84 and 88, and he had been head of Standard Oil. John J. Hooker. He was out of Tennessee, very wealthy white man, and looked like a plantation owner, really. 3-piece vest, hat, the whole bit. And he was just a colorful character and a wonderful human being. And I remember him asking my mother something that my mother was insulted at the time. She said, but you know what? As I get older, I see his point. He said, do you think that if blacks and whites reversed positions, do you think that we behave the same way? My mother said, no. And you know what? People behave the way people behave. And people do what people do. I mean, it's just, we're human. Dwight, Dwight.
Can I make my last point?
I was trying to get you on earlier. Yes.
Yeah, is that the system is the system. You already was talking about the system. The system is that white people are rich and black people are poor for really one reason and one reason only. Not because white people are more ingenious, because they are more progressive, not because they are more resourceful. Is that white people print the money, they put their picture on the money, and then they pass it around to each other. And energy follows the money. And so if the reverse was we had the opportunity to print our own money and pass it around to each other and determine its value, then it would be an equitable society. As it is now, white people have the power to print the money, put their picture on it, declare it as legitimate currency, and then to disqualify anybody else who put their own money as counterfeit. And so that system is going to always remain unequal as long as they have the capacity from the Federal Reserve to print the money and decide then who they give it to and how much they charge for giving it away or lending it away.
Oh, that's what you want.
And they just lock us out of that. We have no access to that.
You're saying that's part of the conceit of the Trump trial. You see, this is what they do with each other. They help each other to be billionaires, not be billionaires, whatever. I mean, that's part of it. Whatever his malfeasances have been, the system is a hustle. Boom. It is, and it's rigged. Max Wolf, your closing thoughts. You got the floor.
The good news is The good news is you don't need powerful friends to just start telling people you're a billionaire, especially if you don't mind if it's not true. You can have any old friends for that one. But yeah, look, obviously that's the highest and best use of the time. What I do think is that an economy is a system of producing and distributing wealth, and decisions are made about who has to produce and who gets to consume that wealth. And those break on all kinds of different lines: skilled, unskilled, male, female, old, young, citizen, guest worker, citizen, illegal worker, white, black, one region to another, urban, rural, right? And that's kind of the history. And once there's a distribution, the people with the money spend a lot of that money to stay on top of the distribution, right? And they spend the money to build a culture that says they belong on top. And they build a science that says it's scientifically ordained. And they build a religion that says it's religiously or divinely ordained, right? Because that's how you stay in there. Because the role is itself fragile, because it has no basis in any universal truth. That's true whoever is in charge and whoever is subject, right? And so the question becomes, what are the indignities, the cruelties, and how much of the total social wealth that we produce do we spend trying to keep things as they are? How unnatural and expensive is it? And that's culture and politics from a very structural perspective, right? And so it's, again, just so that I'm clear, I don't think that the structural perspective is smarter or better or somehow dominant, needs to be dominant. I just think it's important and we don't see it. We have a very individualist social analysis here, where most people analyze a society as some nameless, faceless mob of others, good and evil, and themselves in some eternal face-off where they determine the outcome. And I guess if I had 2 points, I would say structures matter more than individual decisions in a lot of outcomes. Not your personal life, not your love life, not your parenting, right? But even in those places, there's structure all over the place. But in the big things that we talk about, like injustice, right? And so without trying to be corrosive or erasing people's lived experience as individuals, which is profound and real, and that's how we live. We live as individuals. I think neglecting the structural conversations is part of how we neglect addressing the structural inequities. And that was the only actual motivation of my comment.
Mm.
That was profound, Rick.
Absolutely.
That was profound.
Structure matters, everybody. And the structural really matter. Well, that is why he is here every Thursday.
Yeah.
And grab him.
I also think it helps sublimate the I'm better than you, you're better than me. If it's an accident of history and I'm bossing you around and stealing from you now, it's a weird basis to decide I'm better than you at something. Right? On the other hand, if a guy's pointing a gun at you, I suggest you agree with him for the moment. Like, I'm not crazy here. There's some individual decision making that has pretty big ramifications pretty fast.
You say for the moment, agree. You got it, Chief. You're right. Oh, no, don't say boom. But I hear you. I absolutely hear you. Oh boy. I love you all, Dr. Wolf. You know, you got my heart. Dwight, you have my heart. Reverend
Thank
Dr.
you.
Yeary, you have my heart. And as do you, Reverend Dr. Yeary and Robert Patillo and Henry. Thank you for a great show. Thank you all for everything. And thank you all, Morning Stars, for being there. You mean so much. And call in. I love the conversation that you all have on the side. I think that's important. But I think it would be helpful to the broader audience if people could also hear your voices. It's important. You can lose so much in the translation as you are. And I love you too, Yvonne, when you're typing. Well, now just think about it. Think about it. If the first time you tell your beloved that you love them, you're not going to text it. I hope something gets missed. Maybe the phone's not working. Maybe their phone died and they don't get back to you in time. Boy, that kills the moment. It might kill the relationship. Okay. So that's my only point. Just let's start engaging with our voices. Let's start doing that. I think that's healthy. You know, I have one person who's very close to me and he only likes to text. But it also cuts off engagement. Like if I disagree or if we have a disagreement, he can say what he has to say and boom, that's it. And he's done. Like I said, that's not healthy. And since that's how you want to do it, I'm not going to engage you that way because I don't want to be bothered with that. At this point in my life, at my age, I kind of do what I want to do. So there's that. But I love you all. I love you, love you, love you, love you. And thank you for being here. You make it all happen. And you're the reason why we do this every day. So I love you, everybody. God bless you. God bless you, Dr. Wolves, Dwight McKee, Reverend Dr. Yuri, Robert Patillo, and Henry. God bless. Love you all. Have a great one.
Thanks all.
Thank you
Be
all
safe
so
out
much.
there.
Thank you.